And we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I'm delighted today to be joined by Dr. Friederike Ernst. We're going to talk about everything Gnosis. For those who don't know, Gnosis is a very broad ecosystem with a number of different components, from the chain to different dApps to the way that the ecosystem is supported and funded, even down into decentralized governance. And we're going to try and cover as much of that today. Friederike, thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing today?
Thank you for having me. It's a wonderful day. We just got out of Berlin Blockchain Week. So, super happy to be here.
Fantastic. I've been watching from afar Berlin Blockchain Week. I mean, there's already a lot of teams, a lot of excitement in Berlin, some great talent. What were some of the takeaways for you from the week?
Oh, for me, the key takeaway was very much that the ecosystem is transitioning into an application ecosystem rather than just an infrastructure provider ecosystem that we have been for the longest time so far. So kind of getting actual Web3 applications in front of people without them actually having to know that they're using Web3. This is what it's all about now.
Absolutely. And that's a big part of the Gnosis proposition as well, I know. So very excited to hear more about that and your experience of what it takes to actually get those applications in the hands of users. For the guests listening in, please do give us your GMs. Let us know where you're coming in from. Let us know where in the world you are, what you're building, who you're building with, what chains you're building on. And if you have questions for myself or Friederike, please do ask them in the comments below, and we'll try and do our best to get to as many of them in the show or towards the end as we do normally. I'll do my best to multitask, but please do feel free to ask your questions on anything you hear, anything about Gnosis, or anything about Berlin. We'll try and cover as many things as we can. With that in mind, Friederike, this is not your first rodeo. You are a podcaster yourself, so I hope it feels nice and comfortable to be on the other side of the mic. But for those people who haven't met you, you're a co-founder of Gnosis. Could you give us your brief Web3 origin story? How did you find yourself here and with Gnosis?
Yeah, absolutely. So I heard about Bitcoin pretty early on, and initially thought it was a scam. Like many, I was convinced otherwise. So started being active in the ecosystem in 2013. At the time, I was very much, I very much had a real job. So I, I had just finished my physics PhD and was moving on to be a postdoc first at Columbia and then at Stanford. And then I had a professorship in Hamburg back in Germany. But my friends Martin and Stefan, they had forever been talking about blockchain stuff and building things on blockchain. They were actually building things from within Consensus, which was one of the very big ecosystem players at the time and is still absolutely around. They are the studio that's bringing you MetaMask, for instance. And Martin and Stefan were the first and second employee at Consensus after Joe and his assistant. And they had kind of started building this bridge market from within Consensus and then spun out into a separate company that I co-founded with them when they spun it out in very early 2017. So kind of I initially took a break from academia, but then kind of stepped down full-time to build things on-chain. Initially, it was very much this prediction market idea. It was the idea to kind of weed out fake news. We didn't call it fake news back then. This is a more recent term, but that was basically the idea. We were so early, so we were the first smart contract deployed on Ethereum at the time. And just because we were so early, we ended up building a tremendous amount of infrastructure, some of which is very much still used to this day. We have spun some of it out as its own company. So, for instance, the Gnosis Safe is very much still around. It's the premier multi-sig wallet on Ethereum, same as CowSwap, which is an MEV-resistant decentralized exchange on Ethereum. Then we've done a number of other projects and protocols along the way. So one of them is Gnosis Chain, which is a layer 1 sister protocol to Ethereum. And we have recently branched out into payment applications and infrastructure. So things like Gnosis Pay, Circles, and Metri.
Wow. So you had a promising career in academia all lined up, and then all of a sudden Web3 landed on your doorstep, and then a few products, a new company, some spin-outs later, Gnosis is very much well established, going well from what I can see. You started, so maybe we'll try to contextualize it for those who are out there and try and kind of put the building blocks around what is Gnosis and what is the Gnosis ecosystem, because you mentioned there's a chain, there's a wallet, there was a spin out. The sister chain of Ethereum is an interesting term that I haven't heard used extensively. So maybe help us understand the architecture of Gnosis and what are the various different components that you're taking out to market.
Yeah, absolutely. So Gnosis basically is an ecosystem of aligned projects that are held together by the Gnosis token. The Gnosis token has been around since 2017. So what it does is it's the staking token for Gnosis Chain. So it works exactly like Ether on Ethereum. You stake it, you validate, and you get you get the block rewards. And then it's the voting token on Gnosis DAO. Gnosis DAO has, by virtue of having been very early in this ecosystem, Gnosis DAO has a pretty large treasury that needs to be allocated to projects. This is the job of the Gnosis token in terms of voting. And then we make sure that projects we have built ourselves and we're invested in are aligned with the GNO token. So, for instance, the Gnosis Safe is the most prominent multi-sig wallet on Ethereum. It's a smart contract wallet. There's in excess of $100 billion in instances of it around the world. And we spun that out 2 years ago. So that means Gnosis DAO retained 20% of the safe tokens, but basically raised the team kind of raised capital with the rest, and also allocated a very large chunk of that to the community. And then kind of the tokens, they get coupled together by being placed in an automated market maker, so that if the safe token goes up, the Gnosis token will go up with it, and if the Gnosis token goes up, the safe token will go up with it, right? So basically, kind of they mutually benefit from another. And then kind of within the ecosystem, we kind of talk about how to align the projects that should be aligned with on a token basis as well. And if we find there are new synergies that should be explored, we talk about them on the forum, and eventually the project is held accountable to that. And kind of if we see, look, there's no longer this kind of level of synergy that we initially expected, then the Gnosis DAO can also always divest, right? So kind of it's a way of kind of building the ecosystem in a flexible way. And then there's also projects within Gnosis that have not been spun out yet, or that are not being spun out at all. And these we also see that kind of if they have a token, it's the Gnosis token. So basically, all value should accrue to the token.
Got it. Very helpful. And there have been some recent milestones. So some of the projects that I think above and beyond those that are well known, right? So Safe, Chain, and others. Metri, Zeal, Kinetex. Would you like to take us through some of the recent milestones? I mean, it sounds like Gnosis is sort of operating as sort of a venture co at the moment, or a venture ecosystem where lots of new projects are being incubated, retained or spun, which I think is super exciting to be in that space. I work for IOG, Input Output Group, which is a very similar concept. And so you get sort of all of the excitement and power of the established organization, but you get to experiment, you get to benefit from technical synergies, intellectual synergies, being able to benefit from actually being able just to work with great minds from time to time. But so take us through some of the recent milestones as well. That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have very much focused on the payments and financial rails ecosystem. And the reason behind this is pretty pretty simple, actually. When Bitcoin first launched, we talked about this as electronic cash, right? And so far, this hasn't happened for the ecosystem. It's not. I mean, it's been 15 years, right? And it's not happened. So no one really uses this as cash. And we
It's a
asked
tricky one,
ourselves,
right? Because I think if you think of Bitcoin as digital gold or as
yeah,
Bitcoin as cash, if you think of it as cash, different story. But if you think of it as gold, or maybe even parallel to a pension, nobody goes and buys their coffee with their pension. Your pension is designed to sit there, accrue value, be scarce, be a future source of income for you. Don't spend it because it's going to get bigger. That's, I guess, some of the mentality that's gathered around Bitcoin. Yes,
yeah.
there are kind of cash derivatives of Bitcoin and so on and so forth, but I think that's been one of the challenges. But you see it as, okay, Bitcoin established the model, but maybe we need to do it differently.
Yeah. So basically, I actually look at the underlying technology and I compare that to kind of what payments work like today. Um, and as an engineer, I can tell you that it is very much more efficient, or can be much more efficient than kind of the ways that electronic money works today. Um, and if you look at where permissionless and decentralized systems can do better than traditional systems, you end up with three key points. One is individual agency. They allow people to do things that otherwise that would not have been accessible to them. Secondly, they allow decentralized ownership of things. And thirdly, which sounds weird to us now, but mark my words, they allow a much, much better user experience because innovation is without barriers and permissionless. So kind of say, for instance, um, I have a killer feature idea for Google Maps. There's no way I can actually contribute that to Google Maps because Google Maps is a proprietary product. I can't just add that one feature. I kind of have to replicate the entire product offering that Google Maps already has in order to kind of add one feature. This is not the case in kind of like Web3 systems. So
100%. And if we look back to open banking and PSD2 around the mid to late 2000s, this was the same thing, is that it required a systemic regulator-driven mandate to open up bank accounts and banking technology to enable just aggregation of accounts. Right? Okay,
absolutely.
that was the first application, and
Yeah.
then we saw some further innovation afterwards. But we certainly didn't see anything like the pace of change that we see in Web3 and blockchain because, as you described, that closed, structured, regulator-driven, standards-based. I mean, everything needs standards, but that very friction, complex, regulator-led innovation is never going to be faster and better.
Absolutely. And if you now ask yourself, having built all this infrastructure that we and others have built, how do we get that in front of actual people? How do we get normies to kind of use it in some way? You have to ask yourself, what is the best application that I can build that is legitimately at least twice as good as what people have today, as at least twice as good as the Web2 equivalent. And if you look at different arenas here, it was very clear to us that the payments arena is from an engineering standpoint, it's relatively simple compared to others. So say for instance, social media would benefit massively from being natively on a blockchain. Social media is much, much more complex than payments and financial rails. I mean, payments and financial rails is basically accounts and balances. And this is something that we know how to do very well. So kind of from an engineering standpoint, this seemed very doable. From a value add standpoint, this also seems very doable and very promising because while payments for the global north are actually pretty seamless. So you and I both, we have probably like 5 credit cards in our wallets, and typically for us, there's 0 fees, and transfers are instant and so on. There are edge cases where also for us it doesn't work so well. So we kind of, if I want to, I only yesterday I sent a wire to the US, and it cost me $80 to actually send funds from Europe to the US. So that very much was not frictionless, but kind of by and large it is. This is not the case for many other locations around the world, right? So fast and easy payments are not prevalent everywhere, especially not coupled with a US dollarized account. So there are large parts of the world where even just having a dollarized account is a huge status symbol because it's very difficult to obtain, right? So I'm thinking about large parts of Latin America, Turkey, for instance. Yeah. So basically, holding dollars for us, this isn't even a product anymore, right? Basically, anyone can hold USDC or any other dollar stablecoin. But access to that currently is very difficult. So if you look at like sorry, this is a very long-winded way of getting back
This
to
is
your
a helpful
question.
run-up, but I feel like the use cases are going to drop
Yes,
like dominoes
it's
when we get there.
exactly. Um, what we actually need is we need a way of making it possible for regular people to kind of interact with a lot of these protocols and products that are already out there. Basically, just opening this up to the majority of people, because I don't know when you have last onboarded someone into the ecosystem, but it's a pain, right? So basically, it's like, okay, now you need to download this browser extension. Browser extensions are inherently, they seem somewhat dodgy, especially if you're not used to keeping like a large portion of your money there. So okay, now you have this thing. It's kind of, yeah, it looks like a fox. I know, it's a bit curious. Okay, it looks like a fox. Now these are your 24 words. You should write those down. Put them somewhere you will never lose them, but also make sure no one ever sees them, or all your funds will be gone. This is not a way of onboarding people into the next generation of financial infrastructure. That's a nightmare. So, kind of in principle, we kind of have the technologies to make the onboarding much easier, to kind of make people not worry about transaction fees, to not have this uh, uh, have this incredibly bad um, uh, d- uh, user flow where kind of you have to allow certain things first, and then kind of they happen, and then you kind of have to rescind your approval, and it's I mean,
It's complicated.
none of this, yeah, none of this transitions. I mean, most of this doesn't work well for us, and it's not going to work well for kind of the general public. So making this much easier to use, much easier to understand, and looking at the true value propositions that we have today, this is something that we think we can facilitate. This is why we built a new wallet called Metri. It's currently in beta. You can download it from metri.xyz. And basically, it allows you to onboard with passkey. So passkey is kind of the authentication method that you might know from your neobank account or PayPal. It just it just works with your biometrics. In effect, kind of your biometrics are the key to the safe that is deployed in the background. So it's still fully self-custodial. So you always hold all of your funds, but you don't have to bother with a seed phrase or a private key. Then there's other things that we can do be under the hood, right? So we can do things like we can batch transactions together. We can allow applications to assume that the user has a smart contract wallet and abstract gas fees away from them, because this is not what people expect from Web 2, right? So kind of you browse to um, a uh, a website. Say you go to The Guardian. Um, the Guardian would never tell you, now, Anthony, please pay 0.2 cents. This is your portion of our AWS bill, right? It's kind of just amalgamated into their business model. They show you ads and kind of they pay their AWS bill from that. And in principle, we need to be able to allow applications on Web3 to do the exact same. So basically, building better infrastructure with which people can access things that are already out there. This very much has been our mission here. So Metri is this easy to use wallet. Zeal is actually also a wallet. It is built by an ex-Coinbase and Revolut team. So Revolut is a European neobank. Zeal is something that Gnosis DAO has invested in because we firmly believe that there need to be several good wallets for any ecosystem. So Zeal is inherently multi-chain. It appeals to the DeFi users. It has all the DeFi integrations already in there, but it also doubles down on user experience. So it also uses the same passkey integrations that Metri uses, and other nice features. Kinetics is just a pretty easy way to do instant cross-chain swaps. And Gnosis Pay, which is also a workhorse for us, is a way of integrating the Web3 financial rails with the financial rails that are already out there and everyone knows. So what Gnosis Pay did at first is it established a way of connecting a Visa card to a self-custodial on-chain account, and allowing you to kind of to spend your on-chain funds everywhere that Visa is accepted. And it's very much, it should be said, it's very much not an experience where you kind of have to load up your card, which had existed previously. It's a way of connecting your on-chain wallet with a Visa card so that when you tap the Visa card, your funds are taken out of your on-chain wallet right that second.
Very good. And I saw an announcement from Kai Sheffield. Shout out Kai, from the show that my partner in crime, Mauricio Magaldi, had been doing with 11FS, covering specifically innovation in financial services around Web3. And this is a recent announcement, right? The Visa announcement, the Gnosis Pay Visa card. That's this week, today, yesterday.
Yeah.
How long has it been out?
Yeah, it came out yesterday, I think. It's been we've been using Visa for this since Gnosis Pay launched. But yeah, the partnership announcement is out now. And in principle, we can connect the legacy off-chain world and the on-chain financial rails in more ways than this. So another connection that's already out there is Monerium. It allows you to have an IBAN attached to your wallet. So you send funds to that IBAN, they show up in that wallet within 2 minutes.
Well, and it turns up in the wallet in a particular cryptocurrency, or it turns up in US dollar, euro value? How does the translation from
exactly.
So let's say here I'm out here in Portugal. I've got some euro that I want to send to you. I've got an IBAN that you send me. What happens next?
Yeah, so basically you send those euros to that IBAN, and basically they show up in Monerium, which is an e-money institution licensed in Europe. They show up in their bank account more or less instantly, and they mint an on-chain representation of those euros for you. They're called Yuri, and they are instantly credited to your wallet. Basically, the model works exactly the same as USDC. So basically, they custody the euro in an escrow account. There are standards as to kind of what you're allowed to do with them, and then kind of they issue the same euro on chain for you.
Very cool.
Yeah, and basically, you can do SEPA transactions right out of your wallet. It's crazy. It works, and it's I recently paid my dentist's bill on chain. I mean, who can say that? That's really cool. And so, in principle, we kind of have these things. We just need to make them more usable, and that's kind of what Gnosis 3.0 is all about. So, kind of, we have this very strongly aligned ecosystem around the GNO token. We have credibly neutral infrastructure. And now kind of we're building all these very payments oriented use cases on top of this ecosystem to demonstrate that, yes, we can absolutely build things that speak to real people and make real people's lives better in at least one aspect.
Fantastic. So let's go into the roadmap now and what that means, because I think, like you said at the beginning of the show, we've built enough infrastructure now. It's important for us to build applications around that. And so we have the chains. What it feels like is the partnerships and the integrations, whether it be with a Monerium for IBAN and SEPA transfers, whether it be with Visa for its card network. Those are some of the kind of core partnerships where you see, well, where financial transactions exist in the world, and you're starting with large organizations in jurisdictions where those things are established, and you can plug them in or integrate them in a relatively straightforward way. No, I don't want to say straightforward, because I'm sure it's not straightforward, but where the integration on the doing or making those integrations happen can be high impact and highly useful. You're not speculating on use cases that might be, you're making use of technology that is regularly used today, which I think is super powerful. What else is on the roadmap, or how should we be thinking about the roadmap for Gnosis, if focused again around payments or financial digital assets?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are actually a large number of AI companies on top of Gnosis Chain.
I
And
thought there might be.
yeah, and curiously enough, the AI agents that live on chain, they like paying each others for kind of for services. So kind of they trade on prediction markets and other venues against each other, and there are tens of thousands of payments from AI agent to AI agent every week on Gnosis Chain. I see um, AI as a huge opportunity for the space. So, kind of, I think the AI blockchain intersection is real, and it definitely has traction. So, we're interested to kind of double down on that as an ecosystem.
So in that space, it's
Um,
about how do you create share of value between autonomous agents, and maybe the rails or the programmability of those agents, because you don't necessarily want them running wild. You want them to be usable and programmable by whoever is asking those agents to act on your behalf, but you don't want them to be fully autonomous forever, because at some point the human behind those agents wants to do something, or wants to draw back funds, or wants to do something to that end.
yeah, exactly. And kind of blockchains are just really good at machine to machine payments because kind of machines can use it inherently. So it just standardizes things.
Gotcha.
Um,
So AI enablement of AI to AI payments already on the
yeah.
map.
So that's already happening. So this is very much already happening. Yeah, and then we're gonna double down on the payments and financial rails use cases. So we're currently working on integrations with Pix, which is the way people transfer money in Brazil. We're looking at other jurisdictions, so kind of just getting this in front of as many people as possible, and kind of making sure that the user experience is better than what people currently have in Web 2 terms. And yeah, that's very much a full-time job. So we're learning new things every day. I mean, Martin, Stefan, and I, the founders, we are all very much German engineers. So kind of building products is it's very interesting to us because it's also novel in a way. But yeah, we have hired fantastic people with Web 2 backgrounds and Web 2 expectations of how smooth things should work. And yeah, just demonstrating that, basically, that offering better products with credibly decentralized infrastructure in the back end is definitely the goal for this year. We also have interesting applications in the pipeline. So there was recently a proposal to Gnosis DAO to build something called Gnosis VPN. Gnosis VPN works on the decentralized Hopper mixnet. So anyone can kind of run a Hopper node and route their data through this mixnet. But basically, Gnosis VPN kind of puts a nice user interface in front of it. And if you're interested in using a fully decentralized VPN for privacy or location-based reasons, Gnosis VPN has you covered, because you will never get into a situation where it's detectable that you're on a VPN, right? Because this is sometimes what people run into. So you can't connect to certain services because they know you're using a VPN. So companies can subscribe to lists that kind of just are regularly updated with known IP addresses for exit nodes of VPNs, and then they just block those, right? But if you do it over a truly peer-to-peer network, this is no longer possible. And at the same time, there's no VPN company that kind of has all your browsing data stored in its log somewhere, right? So kind of this is very much for people who rely on enhanced privacy. And it is built on Web3 technology, but usable for anyone. And I think this is kind of really where we need to get to. If you ask people who use the internet every day, how does the internet work? They don't know, and they shouldn't have to know. And I think it's the same for Web3 technology. So same with almost any kind of advanced piece of technology. So you use Google Maps on your phone. They show you as a little blue dot. How does your phone know where you are, where the phone is? Exactly. You don't have to know. You shouldn't have to know. Same with Web3 technology. So kind of now we can live up to kind of like these very old value propositions of Web3, namely individualized agency and decentralized ownership, and so on. And you can now be a co-owner of the services and products you use on a daily basis. Not all value that you generate on the internet kind of has to accrue to the same 5 companies in California. And I think that's beautiful. And kind of making this workable is it's challenging, because obviously it's much more complex than just building things on centralized infrastructure. But I think we and the ecosystem can get there.
That's really interesting. And there's a lot to unpick in that one, because the fact that the idea started from the community said, okay, we think there's an opportunity for creating a VPN service that makes use of certain capabilities. You found a partner in an existing peer-to-peer privacy network, working for Midnight and focused on data protection and compliance related use cases. It's a really interesting one for me, because VPNs, you're not necessarily required by any regulation or compliance requirements to share whatever you're browsing. Browsing should be private, right? Your private activity should be private until there is any regulation that comes to play. Privacy is a great thing. Privacy is important.
Even when the regulation comes to play, right? They don't need to know what exactly you're browsing. They should just know that what you're browsing is fine. And there's also a way that we can now attest to that using this novel technology in the form of zero knowledge proofs. So I can very much say I am a Web3 version of Shopify, and you want to buy alcohol online. I can verify that you are more than 18 years old without actually having to divulge how old you are exactly, right? I can share that you have enough money in your account to actually cover this without sharing how much you have exactly, and so on. And I think this regulatory overreach, that kind of as much data as possible is shared, And maybe I'm being unfair here. I don't even think it's regulatory overreach. I think often
Sometimes it's
it's
corporate
kind of just
clumsiness.
exactly
It's
or corporate
I need a
overreach.
proof of ID, so let's get a passport. Or do you really need my passport? Or do you just need this one particular line out of my passport? You need a verified document that provides a yes/no statement, right? But the current Web 2 manifestation of that is send your passport over the internet to a third party.
Absolutely. And I think this kind of gets correlated against a lot of things that you do online. And I mean, this is of course exacerbated by the fact that most of the activity that you conduct on the internet is with the same 5 big companies. So basically everything gets correlated, and then kind of like your profile gets monetized by kind of showing you advertisements. Well, actually, in the best case, advertisement. Otherwise, just micro targeted news. Kind of that is bespoke to your exact profile, and that's I think a lot of people don't understand that while Web 1 was very much about um, sharing information, disseminating information, and so on, Web 2 has kind of turned all of us into products. And I mean, the internet is a wonderful thing, and it used to belong to everyone because it belonged to no one. And Web 2 very much does not belong to no one. Web 2 belongs uh, to mega coups that don't have your best interests at heart, and kind of turning this into um, a free and open internet again. I think at the very bottom of it, that should be Web3's mission. And now that kind of we have these building blocks that kind of make Web3 accessible for um, normies, or that can be used to make Web3 accessible for normies, I think we can actually deliver that.
I fully agree. And I don't think it's a big step. The challenge is always going to be the commercial model, right? The giving away utility for free at the expense of sharing data has been a very successful commercial model. And the nice thing about Web3 is that you can generate aligned incentives or win-win incentives because of the way that we can look at the use of tokens, or the way that we can look at distribution of rewards in an automated way. We need to normalize that a little bit, right? Because when you
Yeah.
say, I'm going to browse the internet on Brave and I'm going to be rewarded in crypto, it's like, oh, I don't know about that. That sounds a bit dodgy. Or am I going to have to start doing my taxes because I'm using Brave browser in a different way, or something like that? There's some user experience challenges that sit behind that, but the
And
vision
that's
and the
the
mission.
shared ownership,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's the shared ownership that kind of Web3 enables. Um, yeah, so, and I think this will also make it easier for people to start new things, because now, their friends can directly invest in that, or people who know them can, because kind of raising capital, it's really, it's not only is it difficult and kind of takes a certain type of profile, it's also very expensive. And we often don't talk about this. Yeah, so radically lower barriers to entry, kind of giving people agency back, and decentralizing ownership. So it's, yeah, absolutely.
Love that. And I'd like to talk about decentralized governance next, if I may, because I think this is an important pillar of how do we grow these organizations? How do we allocate funds? How do we demonstrate, or how do we ideate around what comes next? I mean, you mentioned the idea around VPN was something that was community driven, and so I'm assuming
Yeah.
some treasury funding was allocated to enable that to happen. Let's start at the beginning, though. Maybe give people who aren't familiar with working with DAOs, or aren't part of a community treasury initiative, in particular L1s or L2 chains. What is the concept of decentralized governance for you, and how is it working on Gnosis today?
Yeah. So there are different ways of tackling decentralized governance. So you have things like one person, one vote, and then you just have coin voting, and kind of there's different approaches as to whether people can delegate their stake, and so on. Um, I think it is not unfair to say that it doesn't work very well at the moment. So governance is incredibly complicated if you kind of look at how governments work and kind of just kind of reverse engineer it kind of from a mechanism design standpoint. It's really, really convoluted, and often sometimes it's too convoluted, but in principle, actually making sure that there are only a limited number of proposals to be voted on and so on makes a lot of sense, because currently how Gnosis DAO and a lot of DAOs in the space work is that people who hold GNO tokens can vote on proposals. Anyone can post proposals, or sometimes there are some requirements. Usually you need to hold at least $1,000 in the protocol token in order to kind of post a proposal. And then kind of you post it, and anyone who holds tokens can vote on it. And then kind of you need to reach a quorum, which is defined by every DAO. And often just reaching quorum is difficult because there's a lot of proposals and there's voter fatigue. And this kind of leads to the rise of protocol politicians, where kind of they have tokens delegated to them, and they in effect kind of are very influential, but often not paid by the protocol itself. And I mean, just even just kind of like talking about it like this makes very clear that there is ample room for improvement. Back in the day, in 2018 or so, we worked together with a company called DAO Stack, that was founded by two physicists, which obviously is very, close to my heart because I'm a physicist also. But they had understood that attention is kind of really the scarce resource in a DAO, and if you just spam a DAO with enough proposals, um, y- people won't do the due diligence, and you might be successful in passing a malicious proposal just because there's just so many. And how yeah, exactly. And yeah, so basically they had understood that kind of attention is kind of the thing that kind of needs to be that is scarce and needs to be budgeted for. And so they kind of had auctions and prediction markets and everything integrated into the protocol, and was tremendously difficult to understand. In principle, it probably might have worked, but it was so difficult no one could understand it. So kind of they failed, sadly. And I'm still holding out for a much better governance framework. So I think in principle, a lot of things can be done on Web3, right? So for instance, do you know what liquid democracy is?
I think for the sake of the listeners, let's go through a short description, because I think this is important and I think it's worth just briefly giving an overview.
Yeah. So basically, in DAOs today, you can often delegate your tokens to someone who then votes on your behalf. And the idea is that because DAOs are complex and there's lots of things going on, and you need a certain level of technical expertise often to kind of make an informed decision. And many people are part of several DAOs, so kind of this would kind of take out a significant chunk of your day. You just delegate it to someone whom you trust. In principle, this could be much more granular, right? So basically, I could say, Anthony, he's really good with treasury decisions. I'm happy to kind of delegate my tokens to him for all kinds of treasury decisions. However, he is no good at partnerships. So kind of all my I will delegate all my tokens for partnership purposes to someone else who excels at this. And I will delegate all my tokens to a third person for marketing and a fourth person for audits and so on. And basically being able to kind of very granularly um, uh, assign who gets to decide for you on which issues. And in principle, this is very much doable on Web3, just because kind of that's how Web3 works, right? But it's not built yet. So I'm very much looking forward to kind of trying that out when and if and when it gets here. I think what can be said is that our governance mechanisms need to become much more sophisticated than they currently are, because I know that for Gnosis DAO and frankly, and all other DAOs that I know out there, getting to quorum is often difficult. Then kind of often the decisions that then are made are just because certain people behind the scenes keep pushing other people to vote, and they don't look into it deeply enough and so on. So it's there's room for improvement. I don't think it's a failed mechanism, but it's very much an underdeveloped area of Web3 activity. And yeah, so basically getting better governance mechanisms is necessary. But on the plus side, we should definitely say that people who hold tokens, they get a say. And this can't be said for many of the legacy governance
corporates or
mechanisms
businesses or
within. Exactly.
exactly. And I mean, it's interesting because you said at the beginning of the show we started with payments because it's simple, and
Yeah.
it's a value transfer between parties and accounting. With governance is about as complicated a thing as you could possibly try to reinvent. And we've been through, I mean, 2000 years since the Greeks, but then more if you go back to the history of how humans have governed things or made decisions. We've got some benefits in terms of how we can do that digitally, how we can look at wallets, how we can look at alerts, how we can do automation around governance, right? The digital experience of government in countries today is still very, very immature. There's not very many countries where you can see fully digital governance playing out in an accessible, easy to use way. We also don't want to assume that governance should only be limited for people who have an understanding of Web3 wallets, right? Because there's an accessibility opportunity there or requirement where everybody should be able to participate if they're interested in the domain. It's not easy. And we're seeing whales manipulating votes. Like you said, voter fatigue, spamming of the number of proposals that can go through. But then the counter argument is, well, if you throttle the number of proposals, there'll be less innovation. Do you really want less innovation? So how do you optimize for the right amount of innovation, the right amount of attention, and who decides what's right? The sad fact is that a lot of these things are now being divided or decided by consensus. And consensus decision making is, by its very design, slower and harder than having a single autocratic leader or a single head of function to make decisions on functionality. But what I would say is, for anybody who is listening in who hasn't participated in some protocol governance or other, or spent a little bit of time, go check out the Gnosis DAO website, or go check out OpenGov on Polkadot. These are really interesting, incredibly innovative, incredibly dynamic places. And we need people who are non-Web3 natives to come in and look at this and say, we can do better. Or this is how we do it for corporate voting, or this is how we do it in our particular industry, or in joint venture accounting. Yeah, these are similar concepts, analogous concepts, where we don't have to reverse engineer a digital version of how we engage with politicians today, or how we engage with local governance today, because that's been generated for the masses, for a non-digital audience. What about for a digital audience that's just a little bit better? I don't know if we're going to solve it on this particular conversation, but I appreciate the debate, and I appreciate sharing the experience on the Gnosis DAO as well, because clearly we're not alone in other ecosystems facing similar challenges. Intersect and the member-based organization for Cardano is going down the same road as well, and many others. But I think it's probably harder to solve for than payments. With a couple of minutes left to go, I will ask, above and beyond DAO tooling and making the DAO user experience a little bit better, what do you think are some of your final thoughts on what more is required to see wider adoption of Web3 tools, applications, technology in the wider world?
Yeah, I think kind of to all builders, ask yourself what tool your aunt would use, right? So kind of not kind of what don't build just for like the 10,000 DeFi users that are out there. Build for, greater humanity. Ask yourself kind of, how can I leverage this to kind of to make, the average human better off. And I think it used to be impossible on Web3 to kind of offer this sort of user experience, but it no longer is. And I think that's wonderful. I think kind of over the next year or two, we will see so many applications that I hope will actually hit the mainstream. And I know that we kind of say this every bull market, but I think this bull market, it's true.
I've been saying it in bear markets as well, to be honest, is if we are going to have value, we've got to make integrations and user experience and try and find a way to have this on the phones, the computers, and the devices of people every day in the industries that they engage with, right? We may see decentralized finance as an alternative investment category for people, and they may get familiarity with that. But what about all the other things we do on a day-to-day basis in terms of managing our finances, sport, gaming, decision-making, like you said, governance, engaging with different industries, our vehicles, our autonomous agents? These are all use cases or industries or applications in the real world that can benefit from some of the tools and capabilities that we've talked about today. So I want to believe that there's, in every example of the low-hanging fruit we've done in payments and digital assets, there are non-digital assets also that are going to go down the same journey. It's just those ones are a lot harder to solve for. Friederike, thank you so much for joining us today. Really interesting wander through what it takes to build a Web3 ecosystem. Loads to follow up on, loads of interesting use cases. So guys, please do go check out the work that Gnosis are doing. Please do go and check out Gnosis DAO. Get yourselves experience with decentralized governance. Thank you so much again, and stay safe out there.
Thank you for having me, Anthony.
That's an absolute pleasure. See you soon.